Ever wonder why certain foods get that unclean label in religious traditions?
Yeah.
We're going deep on the Levitical food laws today.
Okay.
Not to play food police or anything,
Right.
but to unpack the why behind these ancient rules.
Interesting.
Do they still hold up in the 21st century? Let's find out.
Okay.
We're looking at this article, right? Analyzes these laws from all angles.
Okay.
Practical, spiritual, the whole shebang.
Gotcha.
And honestly, some of the forbidden foods
Yeah.
still make sense even now, you know?
Really? Like what?
Well, they talk about pork, big one,
Okay, sure.
and the health risks. Still around today.
Oh, absolutely. Even in our modern world, yeah.
Parasites, man.
Yeah.
The article even mentions, get this, they can travel to the brain.
Oh, we
The chills, right?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if these old rules were onto something practical after all.
That's true. Like a way to stay safe back then.
Exactly. Imagine no refrigeration,
Right.
no fancy labs to test for bacteria.
Yeah.
It's like these rules were early public health measures.
Totally. Yeah.
Better safe than sorry, right?
Especially back then.
And it wasn't just pork on the list, was it? They weren't big fans of shellfish either.
Shellfish? No. Definitely not.
Which, when you think about it, kind of tracks.
Makes sense. Yeah.
The article points out they're bottom feeders,
Oh, right. Yeah.
scooping up whatever's down there.
They're not picky eaters.
So more likely to ingest toxins from the environment.
Exactly. And back then, no way to really clean that out.
Not like today, no.
Big risk.
Huge. So these rules, maybe they seem strange now,
Right.
but back in the day,
Yeah.
pretty practical.
Early food safety.
Food safety, exactly. Makes you think, though,
Good.
how much of what we think is common sense now
Yeah.
is just like knowledge built up over centuries.
Centuries of trial and error.
Trial and error, yeah. But the article doesn't stop at just the practical stuff, does it? It dives into the spiritual side of all this, too.
The spiritual dimension, yeah. That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, so how does spirituality play into all of this? What did unclean even mean in a spiritual sense back then? So we talked about the practical side, like avoiding those ancient food dangers.
Right.
But what about the spiritual dimension? What made a food unclean on that level?
That's a big one. We're talking about ritual impurity in the Old Testament.
Right. The article mentioned that.
So the idea was
Yeah.
eating certain foods, it could actually affect your spiritual state.
Oh, interesting. But it also said that in Christianity today, it's not seen the same way.
Exactly. The author, they're Christian.
Right.
And for them, that whole idea of ritual impurity from food doesn't really apply anymore.
Because of Christ's sacrifice, they were saying.
Yeah, like it kind of transcends those Old Testament laws, you know?
So no need to, like, spiritually cleanse after a shrimp cocktail or anything.
Exactly. But it does bring up something else the article talks about.
Yeah.
These old rules, still meaningful, even symbolically, for Christians today.
Oh, okay, I see. Makes you think about how you view food and faith, huh?
For sure. And speaking of, the author actually tries to follow these Levitical food laws themselves.
Really? Like all of them, even
Uh,
in the modern world?
It's not about, like, rigid rules or fear of punishment.
More like a personal choice kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Spiritual discipline, they call it.
So less about I can't and more about I choose not to.
That's it. A way to practice self-control, be more intentional about what they eat.
I can see that. Like saying no to that extra slice of cake, but with a deeper meaning behind it.
Exactly. Yeah. And for the author, it connects them to their faith, you know?
Like a link back to their ancestors, kind of.
That's it. A reminder of their traditions, how things were done.
Powerful stuff. The article makes it clear, though, that this is just one person's take, right? Not like a universal Christian thing.
Definitely not. But it shows you how ancient traditions can still resonate, even within a modern belief system.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how these old texts still speak to people after all this time. But this whole food symbolism thing, it's not just the Levitical laws, is it?
Nope, not at all. The article actually touches on something called the Byzantine lists.
Byzantine lists.
Yeah, and they offer a really interesting look at how food became, like, a controversial topic in early Christianity.
Wait, seriously. Food fights in the early church?
Not exactly fights, but definitely disagreements.
Like what were they debating?
Okay, so these lists, they came from the Orthodox Church.
Okay.
And they basically outlined what was cool and not cool to eat for Christians back then.
So their idea of clean eating, but like centuries ago.
Exactly. A reflection of their beliefs and what they saw as spiritually appropriate. You know?
And what kind of stuff made the cut? Or didn't make the cut, I guess. The article mentioned something about beavers, right?
Beavers, yep. Big no-no, apparently. Which goes to show, these Byzantine lists, they went beyond just Levitical laws.
So they were adding their own interpretations as they went, adapting to their own time.
Exactly. Reflecting how cultures change, how even religious views on food can evolve.
Wow, so it's not even about the beaver itself, really, is it? It's what the beaver represents in this whole debate about food and faith.
Exactly. What we choose to eat, it's never just about the food itself, is it?
It's about our beliefs, our values.
And even our anxiety sometimes, like, am I doing this right?
Haha, yep, been there. It's amazing how something we often take for granted, like food, can have these deeper layers.
For sure. Food connects to everything, really. Our history, our beliefs, even our place in the world.
You know, this is making me think about that one Levitical law, the one about cooking a baby goat in its mother's milk.
Intense imagery, right?
It's powerful. Even today, it just feels weighty somehow.
Agreed. Definitely makes you stop and think.
It is intense.
Really gets you thinking about our relationship with food, with animals.
Exactly. And the article, it brings up how this law,
Yeah.
maybe it's not so much about like ritual purity,
Right.
but more about respect.
Respect, yeah. For the animals we depend on.
Honoring where our food comes from, you know.
Exactly. Recognizing that connection, how we're all part of this system.
It makes you think, do our modern food practices really do that? Honor that connection, I mean.
It's a good question. It's easy to forget about that, especially these days.
Totally. Factory farming, mass production, it's all so impersonal.
We get disconnected from the source of it all.
This deep dive, I gotta say, it's been eye-opening.
Yeah.
We started with these unclean foods, right?
The Levitical laws, yep.
But this conversation, it's gone way beyond that.
It really has.
It's about how we view food, period.
Totally.
The health stuff, sure.
Yeah.
But also the spiritual side.
The meaning we attach to it all.
The symbolism.
Even ethics, like what's the right way to eat?
That's a big one. And this whole exploration, it's got me thinking, this question, it's ancient, right? But still so relevant today.
Was.
What role does food play in our own beliefs, our own practices?
Whether we're religious or not, right?
Exactly. It's not about following every single rule from the past.
Yeah.
It's about asking ourselves, what matters to us when it comes to food?
What do we want our plates to say about us?
Perfectly said. So next time you sit down to eat, take a second.
Mindful mealtime.
Think about the story behind your food. It's more than just a meal, right?
It connects us to something bigger, something ancient even.
This has been fascinating. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Anytime.